Fifth edition, the college football show for now, depending on your suggestions. So again, we are looking for a name for this show that is going to air as it has started this Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. So just think about this. Once football kicks off on August 24th, then really August 31st, that weekend, wow. We will have no shortage of topics to discuss here at the Voice of College Football. So this will need to be locked in every day with all of you starting during the football season. But why start then? Because you might as well start right now. So we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the interim head coach title of the college football show. Emphasis on the. I actually thought about just naming the show The and having people scratch their heads going, what? Huh? That's stupid. The, what does that mean? The, or is it the? The, we would put it in all caps. The message would eventually get across to everyone. Kind of like the top 25 that actually makes sense, where people are scratching their heads for the first part of the season because they don't understand the logic because there's so little of it out there in our media, that when we present something that is totally logical, makes total sense, that just about everybody in the college football universe has been brainwashed to these are the predetermined best teams in the country. Therefore, even though the results are telling us otherwise through the first few weeks of the season, we're going to keep those teams right there and not acknowledge some other teams that have earned it to date. So if you have yet to join us for a college football season, maybe you joined us starting this off season, you are in for a treat with the top 25 that actually makes sense. More on that at some other time. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to take your calls after we run through a few key notes. Maybe the most important thing I will say for the next few hours, and that includes, I'm not going to state this for our guests. Of course, they are front and center. We've got Parker Thune from OU Insider joining us in just about an hour, followed by Bill Bender of Sporting News. So be looking out for that, which reminds me that our guest list here at the Voice of College Football has been virtually unmatched in recent weeks. Phil Steele, check out the videos with Phil Steele a couple weeks ago. Phil Steele is coming back before the beginning of the season. So we will consider ourselves blessed and fortunate to have Phil Steele say, hey, got to do this again, Mark. And I doubt if there's many out there, because his schedule during the offseason after he publishes the magazine of record is difficult to nail him down once, let alone for two appearances. So I believe this time we'll do it live with Phil Steele so you can come with your comments and questions. Steve Dace. We've recorded a few times with Steve Dace over the last couple of weeks with his power rankings and also his 2024 college football predictions. Check out those videos. Peter Burns joined us from SEC Network yesterday. That video to be released today at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Be looking out for that. 3 p.m. Eastern time with Peter Burns, SEC Network. Tony Barnhart, one of the great minds of college football for decades, Mr. College Football. He is going to join us next week. So be looking out for those. And also, I've had all this information on my hands, all this compilation of data, rankings, ratings for quite some time. So we're just going to unleash it on you in one fell swoop this weekend. So starting tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to run through our program rankings for 2024. So what that is that we rank all the programs each off season. These are not team rankings. These are not all-time rankings. These are program rankings right now. We have produced a couple videos and released those. And so I decided, you know what? Let's just unleash the whole thing and open it up with the call-in lines and the chat, and we'll take people's comments and questions. We will take all the criticism live. So we're doing that tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Please join us for 2024 program rankings. And then keep those notifications coming. You got to be subscribed. Hit the bell for the notifications, because we're going to go live this weekend at some point to do all-time program rankings. So recall that we did a series a few months ago where we looked at each conference and we did the program rankings all time within the conferences. And I will put it down out there as the best ranking system. If you find one better, please send it my way. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I have not seen one. People typically just spitball it. But no, we went through about 15 different measurements, all-time program rankings with each conference. Now, we've had a number of requests to say, Mark, can you put it all together as an all-time ranking nationally? Yes, we can. We will do that this weekend. And also, of course, our national championship list needs to be adjusted because the national championships throughout college football history are pathetic. Many of them are undeserved. Many other teams have earned national championships and have yet to receive those. So we will come up with our own national championship list. If you joined us last offseason, we got started with 2022. Now, of course, there's going to be few disagreements or any kind of controversy involving the college football playoff era. But before that, as we went through the generations, through the decades, and I believe we made it back to 1980, all sorts of issues and controversies and results that makes no sense. So before we take our next call, just make this something to ponder, not just within the college football world, but within life. Just because an authority, and in this case, the AP poll, AP writers tell you something, that doesn't mean it's fact. That doesn't mean it's common sense. That doesn't mean it's based on results. That doesn't mean it makes sense or is logical or it is truth. So do not be a robot that just says, they tell me that this team is the national champion for 1951, therefore they are. No, be smarter than that. We are here, the voice of college football, and we believe you are here. You are one of the elect. Look up that word. That's a word that's been lost through the generations as well. The elect. It's going to be very important over the next couple years, decades. The elect. You're the elect concerning college football, meaning maybe you understand and know a few more things than other people do. All right. We appreciate you being here. Let's take our first call. We've got Dominic on the line.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Dominic. What's going on?
Not much. Now, listen, I know I haven't been here for a while. I might be a little rusty, but hey, that's okay.
Oh, of course it's okay. No, I certainly want to let everyone know that we are a full service operation here at the Voice of College Football. If there are people out there that have never watched or talked about college football, we welcome everyone.
That's right. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple things. First of all, I wanted to talk about my conference championship predictions, since they have been talked about throughout the week. I was just talking about that with Uncle Lou this past Tuesday on his call-in show, so I figured I'd give mine. Since I was with Lou this past Tuesday, give me a second. I've got Michigan and Oregon for one of those. Call me crazy if you want. The ACC.
For which, okay, well, where would they be playing for a conference championship?
That would be the Big Ten.
All right. There we go. The Big Ten championship is going to be Michigan and Oregon. Okay.
And for the ACC, I have NC State and Louisville.
Oh, I like that.
For the Big 12, I have Kansas and Utah.
Okay. I like that.
For the SEC,
okay.
Now, the SEC one might be interesting. Ole Miss and Alabama.
Okay. Why is that more interesting than the others?
Well, you see, I like Ole Miss. I think they have a chance of making it better than Georgia. I'm not saying that just to be crazy. It's just my honest prediction and my point of view.
What is that based on?
What's that based on, you may ask? How they have what's that word that I'm thinking of? What's that word? Oh, players from the transfer portal. Yeah, good players
Okay.
from the transfer portal.
All right.
That's the word I was thinking of. There we go. Now, do you think Ole Miss could make the SEC title against Alabama, or do you think it could be someone else to play Bama?
Well, I could name a bunch of teams that it could be. Anytime you say, can somebody make a conference championship game in particular, I could name off 7 or 8 teams in the SEC, maybe more, that could make the conference championship game. Some combination of Georgia, Alabama, and Texas are the favorites to make the SEC championship game. And then without looking at the Vegas odds, I would conclude that Ole Miss is 4th and LSU is given pretty good odds as well after that. And then everybody else is giving fairly minuscule odds by Vegas, but Tennessee would be there, Texas A&M, and Missouri. I
Right.
like that. Alabama, Ole Miss. Okay.
And for the Pac-12, what's a good one?
This will be a good one. I can't wait to hear this one for the Pac-12.
I got Oregon State.
Okay.
And who would be a good one to play Oregon State?
I think your options are slim, but
USC. How could I forget about the Trojans?
okay. All right. Well, we have a bit of an issue here, Dominic. So when you make these conference championship selections, you may want to actually look up who's in each conference first. That would be my first recommendation before you think about anything else, looking at transfer portal or anything else, that you actually know who's playing in each conference.
Right.
Okay. So there's a problem with your Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, there is.
Where does USC play? What conference do they play in?
USC?
Yes.
The Big Ten.
They're in the Big Ten. So just go through the standings for this year, because there are a lot of changes. So that's understandable. Like you said,
Yeah.
you've been away from the game. We got 13 teams that are playing in different conferences this year.
Yeah.
So USC is one of those.
Jeez. So that means I got to make another pick for Oregon State.
Look into the Pac-12 situation. All right, Dominic, we appreciate you being here. You got anything else for us?
Nope. That's it, Mark. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Dominic. When you're making predictions, everybody loves to make predictions. Of course, not everybody. I'm overstating that. Some of you could care less to make predictions, but you get my point. A lot of people love to make predictions. You know how much they're worth? Out of 99.8% of the people, they're worth nothing. It's similar to what I was told by a gun instructor the other day when he was teaching a class, and he said, you know what I would inform, or if you're in a difficult situation and somebody's got a gun on you, you know what I would, if you've got no escape route, no hand-to-hand combat opportunity, you know what I would expect that you would do that would give you the best chance of escaping? Stand right in front of them. Just stand right in front of them. Because 80% of the people couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, even though they've got a gun license or whatever the requirement is in that particular state. So basically just stand right in front of them. They will miss you. So this is kind of apropos to Dominic and other people's predictions. But that's fine. He's a fan. He's making his predictions. There is only one thing. He could have predicted Vanderbilt and South Carolina in the SEC championship game. He could have predicted Northwestern and Maryland in the Big Ten championship game. And those predictions would have been more logical than his Pac-12 prediction, of course, because you need to at least understand what teams are in what conferences. So that's it's key. It's like when I make my predictions coming up this season, I'll make my predictions for the 2024 season. Maybe we'll do a big extravaganza show. Maybe I'll just produce a video. We don't know. For the 2024 season, my college football predictions, which they've been great. They've been good. They've been decent. They've been off. Depends on the year. Now, in terms of predicting records for these teams at the conclusion of the season, I would love to see who's doing that better than me. Now, I've missed it on the playoffs a few times, certainly. Everyone has. I have not hit all 4 playoff teams each season. No, not even close. But in terms of predicting records at the end of the year, I took inventory of that for last season, maybe the season before, roughly 70 Power 5 teams at the time. I think I got either the exact record or within one game on 48 of them, something like that. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight on this fine Friday, we will deliver our program rankings. You can check out the videos that we released on 100 through 134 and 75 through 99. And I just figured, you know what? To be honest, producing these videos is a pain in the ass. So we're just going to go live and we will throw up the graphics, let them roll, and I will explain the process of ranking all the programs in college football 1 through 134. Let's not let that be confused with all-time program rankings. All-time program rankings. And we are not spitballing this. This is based on the way I approach everything. You got to start with numbers. That is the way to start. Now, you don't rely solely on the numbers because you apply your brain, your knowledge, and other information, context to those numbers, but you start with the numbers. Had a conversation on our Florida State show this week in talking about evaluation of teams and players and quarterbacks in particular. What do you start with? The numbers. If we were going to rank all the quarterbacks in college football for last season, what would we do? We would start with their statistics. Now, would we just come up with a ranking system based on completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio, and just say, that's it? That's the ranking? No. We would bring into the conversation then the context of all those things that go into quarterback play, not just the statistics, but that is the foundation. That's probably 70 to 80% of it. You can say, okay, this dude threw 41 touchdowns with 3 picks with a 72% completion percentage, and this dude hit on 58% of his throws with 13 TDs and 12 picks. I think this guy's better. Didn't see him play at all. I could hand you a stats book from last season, and you would have a pretty good estimation of who the best players in college football are offensively, especially since those numbers are more valid than defensive numbers. The best defensive tackles in the country don't necessarily rack up the most tackles because they have other responsibilities that are more important in terms of tying up blockers and forcing plays and blowing up plays that other people clean up. So the statistics on the defensive side, pass interceptions, sure, that's a great stat. Most of the guys that rack up pass interceptions, it's for a good reason. They're ball hawks. If it's proven from year to year to year, oh, this guy had 5, then he had 7, then he had 6. He's probably a ball hawk. He also could be getting picked on quite a bit. He could be taking chances, giving up big plays, but also getting his occasional interception. He could have been rather lucky in a particular year where he had a couple deflected right at him, or the quarterback missed on a read, or the receiver ran the wrong way and he's just standing there, a la who's probably the luckiest Super Bowl MVP of all time? Related to what I just mentioned, defensive back being in the right place at the right time, picking off passes, They were not exceptional plays. Got to credit the guy for being in the right place at the right time and actually catching the football and then running with it in a straight line. But anybody out there? Most fortunate, opportunistic, you could say lucky Super Bowl MVP of all time? Okay. We'll see if anybody comes up with that. Bingo! Good job, Ralph. Ralph knows his football. Larry Brown. Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers. Cowboys jumped out to an early lead. They were the dominant team in the first half, especially the first quarter. They led 13-0. Steelers crawled back into the game, and by the fourth quarter, they were clearly the better team at that point. They were wearing down the Cowboys. Dallas was wilting. However, Neil O'Donnell, whether it was his fault or not, threw 2 passes into the deep flat, and Larry Brown, Dallas Cowboys cornerback, just happened to be standing there both times and just, boop, ball went right into his lap, picked off the pass, ran both passes down inside the 5 or 10 yard line to set up Dallas touchdowns. No, the first one set up a Dallas touchdown that cemented the game. I'm not going to go through all the scenarios. Anyway, Dallas's lead was down to 20-17. They scored a touchdown to ice the game 27-17. And then I believe his next interception iced the game, or he might have had an interception prior to that. Whatever the sequence there in the fourth quarter, Larry Brown was standing there. Shoot, in 1995, at my age, I'm not saying I could run as fast as Larry Brown, but I was pretty damn fast. I could have caught the football. Now, the tackle might have killed me or something, but I could have caught the ball and ran practically as fast as Larry Brown, down maybe to the 8 instead of the 5. Yeah, he caught the football. It was thrown right at him twice, and he became the Super Bowl MVP. Love that, Ralph. Love it. What's that have to do with college football? Nothing. All right. You've got our buddy LFG telling us numbers are not valid. Well, I'm not going to read the rest of that comment. We won't go into that. I can't imagine somebody saying numbers are not valid. If somebody says numbers are not valid, that, let's not misstate that. Numbers are not everything. They're valid. You give me any situation, any shoot, even outside of sports, but stay within sports. You give me any type of question about who's the best, who's the worst, who's the this, who's the that, what team is the this. Were we saying that Michigan was the best team in college football at the end of the regular season and they were 7-5? No, it was because they were 12-0. And then they won a national championship at 15-0. They didn't go 9-6 or 6-9. Their statistics, they were arguably the best defense in the country. I believe they were the best defense in the country, and the statistics would back that up in every way, shape, or form. Every defensive statistic would back up that they were at least one of the best in that category or the best. And we could apply that to every situation. Does Iowa, have they had one of the worst offenses in college football? Have they been ranked 18th in the country in college football offense? No, they've been ranked 133, 129, 128, 131 because they are one of the worst, and really the worst. When you take into consideration they're a Big Ten team and they're playing 2 schools a year that they should run up 500 yards on out of conference to pad those numbers, and also to take into consideration that they are bringing in top 30 recruiting classes, top 35 recruiting classes, that they can't function in offense beyond that, and that their defense actually puts them in position to score more points. The Iowa offensive showing over the last 4 to 5 years has been one of the grave aberrations and also one of the most pathetic showings in the history of college football. I don't think that's an overstatement. It has been historically pathetic. To say it's been bad would be an insult to the word bad. It's been horrific, pathetic. I guess we would have to put a bunch of expletives in front of those words to just underline the point, to emphasize it even more. But they've got hope this year. Good running back room. Ultra experienced offensive line. We were talking about that last Tuesday with Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm on our Tuesday Iowa show. Please check it out. We should have a bigger crowd on the Iowa show because that's a good show. Every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. Come root for the Hawkeyes, trash the Hawkeyes, or just be a college football fan, better understanding Iowa football with Tim Lester, now the offensive coordinator. And I said, as Corey ran it down for us last week or the week before, experienced offensive line. It's staggering to hear the experience, if not the start total, the games played total, but the time on campus for every offensive line. And Kirk Ferentz said at Big Ten Media Days that they are 7 deep. Starters, quality starters in the Big Ten, 7 deep. Not we got 5 and we got 2 quality backups. No, our 2 guys off the bench, they are Big Ten quality starters. That's what he says. They've not been that. They're known as an offensive line school, or at least they used to be, but they have not produced a really good offensive line for quite some time. The tight ends, exceptional. Maybe the wide receivers. Another astonishing fact about Tim Lester's time in college football as a head coach at Western Michigan, in going 37-32. So they did not have an outstanding run, but they were better than they are now. That he recruited lowly touted wide receivers and did not just turn them into quality college players and did not just turn them into quality NFL players, but he turned them into high draft choices. So you're talking about guys that were lightly recruited, did not have the big star rankings, don't have the size that would dictate or indicate that they would be prized possessions from an NFL scouting perspective, and he turned them into second-round picks. Not 1 guy, not 2 guys, not 3 guys, 4 guys. It's interesting to see if Tim Lester will be able to improve that Iowa wide receiver room, because it was non-existent last year. There was a play. This is funny because I posted this on X, and Caleb Brown's father, mother, grandfather, somebody related to the Iowa wide receiver Caleb Brown jumped on me. So I don't know if they were following me or how it got communicated to them in such way. But I'm watching them play whomever, and I see this would-be touchdown pass thrown to the pylon. Nobody's on Caleb Brown. It's not like he's got to make a difficult catch in traffic or hand fight someone and then get his hands up to pluck the football. Nothing like that. No, he's wide open. So it wasn't just that he dropped the ball. It was about an 8-yard pass. Not that he dropped the ball, but his approach to the football looked like something that you would see at a 7th grade football game. Like he went up like this. He didn't even have to jump, for one thing. It was about that high, but he went like this. This is what I was doing when I was like 9. And then I kept learning, and then I knew to catch the ball with your hands. But anyway, Caleb Brown does this, and the ball bounces off his shoulder, and he drops a touchdown pass. And I posted something on X about how pathetic that looked. And one of Caleb Brown's family members jumped on me. And I said, I'm not calling him a bad person. I'm just saying that was bad. And I also defended him from the standpoint of he doesn't get too many reps. None of these wide receivers at Iowa get any kind of reps anyway. All right. Do appreciate you being here, the voice of college football, the call-in lines in the chat. Also, keep in mind that we've got two excellent guests coming up later in the show. This is the deal going forward, that we are going to come on here every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, for a power-packed 1 hour. And we're taking your calls. We're going to have guests, and we're going to take your calls, and I'm going to go on a rant. So going forward, we'll start this next week. For us to extend past the hour, this has proven successful on the USC channel, on the Michigan channel. We, of course, are looking for your support. So if you want a longer show than an hour, and there's going to be a lot to pack into an hour because I'm going to have guests. I might have one guest. I might have 4 guests. I might have 20 guests, whatever. I'm going to rant, especially once we get into the season. I'm going to have all sorts of stuff to talk about. And then we're going to take your calls. So we have a lot to pack into 1 hour. So we would like to do more than an hour, but it's going to be based on your support. And we will talk about those specifics when we get to that particular show. I guess starting on Monday, we will do that, where we will, of course, be looking for your contributions, your support to extend the show. But you can guarantee, if I make 0, if I make 1 penny, I'm here for an hour with all of you. So you get that power-packed 1 hour for sure. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Speaking of which, shop on Amazon. Use the link that we provide. It's the one way that you can contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. None. Does not cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. I cannot emphasize that enough. You would help us greatly by doing that, and it's completely transparent to you. In no way does it affect your account history, nothing. You are automatically logged in. Use our account. It's like magic. Use our link, and boom, it recognizes it's John Doe, it's you, and there you go. But we get a little credit. So why give the $2 trillion, the $2 trillion company, why give the $2 trillion company all of your money? Make a 3 or 4% donation here to the Voice of College Football. That is not added to you. That's taken from you. Are basically forcing, think of it this way. If you want to push back against the man, you are forcing Amazon to donate to the Voice of College Football. How about that? So please use the Amazon link. We've got our buddy Chris Gates Fitness as our sponsor this week at the Voice of College Football. And training camp is something that is not to be watched. It's also to be participated in. And it's Chris's new program, Training Camp. Why don't we get to that right now as we wait for your calls and for our guests, and any comments and questions that you have, please pass those along as well. I apologize for the delay, everyone, but I did not set this up. And I was expecting to have a producer by this time in the network history here. Producer, stage manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you know the deal. You've been watching. We've got a new sponsor, Chris Gates Fitness. in his online fitness training camp. Chris is an online fitness coach. He's a massive college football fan. I've talked to him. I tested him. I gave him 25 of the most difficult college football questions. I'm kidding. And he has created a fitness community designed specifically for football fans just like you and me. If you're ready to elevate your health and fitness goals and do it with a group of like-minded people looking to support and encourage each of you, check it out. It's phenomenal. Customized monthly workout programs help you to build muscle, burn fat, feel more athletic, and access to live Q&As with Chris, exclusive community support, and more will help hold you accountable and work you toward your goals. Training camp members also compete in fitness challenges each month, as well as sports challenges like weekly football pick'em. How about that? That should get you there. Chris gives out free prizes like home gym equipment, supplements, free one-on-one coaching calls, and more. Just go to the link that we have provided in the description section of all the videos, not just here, but on all the channels. So it's right at the top of the description section. Click on the link and use the code VOICE to get 80% off your first month at just $10 for the first month. That is quite the value. And it is pouring down rain outside suddenly. It's been doing that a lot recently. It sounds like it all over the country. I'm not a weather guy. I do not watch the weather. I should probably do that more often concerning where I live, because there's some dangerous weather or threats of weather at times. We're giving Larry Brown just way too much attention here. So we will go to another graphic on the screen. West Virginia at 6.5. I've not looked at those, which does remind me that we talked about this the other day in terms of win totals. I'm not the master at win totals. I kept track of my record for 2 years just because Steve Dace is the master of win totals. If you want accurate win totals, if you want to make a buck, he will nail it every year. Steve Dace, check out his win totals. And then he throws them by me and I evaluate them. We've done this every year. And so it then caused me a couple of years ago to select my own win totals, of which I hit about 65%. That's certainly good enough to make money, but I have not selected win totals this year. Although here's a freebie for you. Iowa over. Iowa over. Iowa's winning at least 8 games. They're at 7.5. Vegas screwed this up last year. And then in 2021, they had them at 7 or 7.5. They won 10. And you may say initially, well, Iowa's going to have a more difficult schedule than they've ever had before, right? No, not this year. They will in the future. 4 teams come in from the Pac-12, and Iowa gets the supposed 2 worst by far. They get UCLA and Washington. No Oregon, no USC. And back in the old days of the Big Ten East and West, Iowa would get 3 teams out of the Big Ten Eastern Division. This year, they get Ohio State. Okay, tough one on the road. And the other 2 are Michigan State and I don't remember. It's another bad team. There's no Michigan. There's no Penn State for Iowa. Ohio State, Michigan State, and somebody else that's not that good. Maybe it's Maryland, who's decent. Maryland's going to be an interesting team. Not a lot of people talking about Maryland this year, but consider that Mike Loxley has now won 3 consecutive bowl games. That's a school record. 7-6, 8-5, 8-5. But you know what that tells us is he's done a nice job. They're much better than they were when he arrived. However, are they going to push past what used to be Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in the East and is now a thicker layer of exceptional programs ahead of him to get to near the top of the Big Ten? It is doubtful. And it's doubtful this year for sure. I don't know. Maryland, I would think that they would be in the 6 range, 6.5 for an over-under. Again, we've got program rankings coming up tonight at 7 Eastern here at the Voice of College Football. Check out the videos that we posted, but we are going to go live to present the 134 all the way up to number 1, and then you can tell me where I missed it. All-time rankings will come out sometime this weekend, and again, that is going to be a live show. I'm not going to try to edit all that business together. We have given you all of so get primed, get prepped for the all-time rankings show by going back and checking out the all-time program rankings per conference. But we're going to go live. So if you're not subscribed, please do. It doesn't cost you anything. Just please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. But I will say that going forward, starting this week, we will be live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. All right. If you have any questions for Parker Thune of OU Insider, he's going to join us here in about a half hour. And I really don't have anything insightful about Oklahoma on the top of my head right now. We produced an Oklahoma show the last 2 weeks, and we have another one coming up this afternoon. Join us at 3 p.m. Eastern time, 2 Central on the Oklahoma channel with Jason Ray. And we will talk Oklahoma football with fall camp just starting this week. There's not going to be anything out there of significance at this point. God forbid anyone's been injured. That will be most likely the first real news we will hear. We will hear little tidbits that so-and-so's playing well, so-and-so threw a red zone interception. We will hear little tidbits. So-and-so made a play over the All-American safety, and so that's a good indicator. That's what's going on right now as everybody hit camp pretty much Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday this week. Of course, Florida State and Georgia Tech the week prior. So the Seminoles and the Yellow Jackets have already been in camp for a week plus as they play on August 24th. Today is August 2nd. Saturday's the 3rd. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to a real college football game in Dublin, Ireland, of all places. And maybe Georgia Tech's got a shot. A la Northwestern a few years ago when they were a 2-touchdown underdog and they took out Nebraska. They couldn't win one other game the rest of the year. Could not win a game on the North American continent, but they won that game in August, and then they went 0-11. So maybe Georgia Tech's got a puncher's chance, and maybe this is a good time to catch Florida State with a new quarterback, although a very experienced quarterback, 2 extremely experienced quarterbacks on the field in that game with Haynes King, Georgia Tech, and Florida State's DJ Uiagalelei. However, I think that Georgia Tech has a good perception nationally going into this season based on winning a bowl game, finishing 7-6, finishing with a winning record for the first time since 2017-ish, somewhere around there. Probably Paul Johnson's second to last season was their last winning year. So they had to make their way through Jeff Collins, who was awful. And now Brent Key took over for Jeff Collins mid-2022. Finished well in 22. 23, 7-6 bowl win against UCF. win against Miami. But consider this just in terms of perception of the 23 season for Georgia Tech. If Mario Cristobal kneels, not him personally, but if his team, his quarterback, kneels down against Georgia Tech to ice the victory, Georgia Tech would not be a 7-6 football team right now. They would not be a 6-6 football team or a 6-7 football team because they would have not had the opportunity to play in a bowl game. They would have been 5-7, and the vibe around Georgia Tech football would be much different. Much different. What we remember is that they won that game against Miami. They won the bowl game against UCF down 2 touchdowns, and also that they played Georgia rather close, better than they have in quite some time. We got a caller coming on. We got Adam joining us. Adam, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
All right, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I'll be brief. So just generally about college football, I wanted to ask you, as we know, I believe it was 2022, Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game by about 20 points, correct?
2021, yes.
Well, it was Bryce Young's last year. Was it 21 or 22? Whichever it was.
Alabama beat Georgia the year that Georgia won its first national championship in 2021.
Right. So it was 2021 when Alabama won the SEC championship by beating Georgia by about, I think it was 20 points. Then Georgia beat Alabama in the national championship game, basically based on the fourth quarter and Stetson Bennett's 2 touchdowns.
The last
my
4
question
minutes.
for you,
yeah.
Last 4 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So my question
Alabama
for you
had
is,
a lead with 5 minutes left in that game.
They did. And they should have scored more points if they're tight end. I think it was Latu would have caught that touchdown pass. But my question for you is, in 2021, between Georgia and Alabama, who was the better team, given that Alabama won by almost 3 touchdowns in the SEC, but lost by less than that in the national championship?
That's an interesting point that I would love to give more time and attention to, Adam. Is it possible for you to hang on for 15 or 20 minutes? We've got our guest coming in right now. And if you could rejoin us after that, because I think you bring up an excellent point concerning evaluation of teams and national championships.
Okay, yeah. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but my point is, I'm going to go back to this thing that no one seems to like. But why wouldn't it have been better to have a third game between Georgia and Alabama? Essentially a best-of-3 series.
Yeah.
Because people react negatively to that. But essentially, they played twice. And no one could honestly say.
The issue, Adam, is if we made things up, if we were playing like neighborhood football, then we would do it that way. But there's something called a structure to the season. So it's predetermined how the format plays out. But we will discuss soon. All right, Adam? So you can come back if you'd like in today's show, but we'll be free here in a few minutes. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
All right. We got Parker Thune on the line from OU Insider. Parker, how you doing today?
What's going on, Mark?
Doing just fine. Great to see you. Of course, Oklahoma went to camp this week. And typical fan bases want information and intel immediately. Like they just stepped on the field 45 minutes for the first time. They even put pads on. But, hey, we want something. Who's looking good? We don't expect that out of you. But first of all, what was day one this week for OU?
I mean, the pads haven't come on yet. They're just kind of doing their dry run through everything. Obviously, the big thing this fall camp is getting the new guys acclimated, guys like Dominic Williams, the TCU transfer, Branson Hickman, the SMU transfer that's going to play center for Oklahoma, and then getting the remainder of this new offense installed. Seth Luttrell takes over as offensive coordinator after the departure of Jeff Lebby. So I think those are kind of the 2 main objectives for Oklahoma this fall camp, but there hasn't really been anything super noteworthy that's happened on the practice field thus far.
You field calls every day. You're on the message boards. Well, hopefully not too much, but you have to kind of keep track of what the pulse of the fan base is. What are they talking about? I know what happens nationally with the narrative concerning this team and this program, but internally within the fan base, what are they concerned about, happy about, optimistic about?
I think they're optimistic about everything that they bring back on the defensive side of the ball. 9 of 11 starters returned for Oklahoma. Again, you plug Dominic Williams into the equation, Peyton Bowen and PJ Adibawara, the 2 5-star freshmen from a year ago, are a year older. They've made gains in the weight room. There's a lot of excitement surrounding those two in particular, what they bring to the table. Caden Woolard, the transfer defensive end from Miami of Ohio that was a first-team All-MAC selection last year, is expected to play a big role. Des Malone, transfer cornerback, All-Mountain West selection out at San Diego State last year. So on the defensive side, Oklahoma ought to be really, really solid this year. And I think there's finally a legitimate expectation from the fan base, not just optimism, but an expectation that, okay, this Oklahoma defense is going to resemble the great Oklahoma defenses of old that led this team to 4 national championship appearances in the span of a decade under Bob Stoops in the 2000s. So I think the main point of apprehension is the offensive line, not because the talent isn't there. It is. They hit the transfer portal hard, brought in Hickman, brought in Fabechi Wiwu from North Texas, who was a highly coveted guy, Garen Hatchett from the University of Washington. Jacob Sexton returns as the starting left tackle after making spot starts there the last couple of years. So they do have to replace all 5 starters from last year, and that's why there is that apprehension. It's perfectly rational. It's warranted. You have the talent there. It's always a matter of how it gels up front with that offensive line unit. You can have 5 dudes that on their own are real individually gifted, but if they don't play cohesively as a unit, you're going to have problems.
You hit on the main bullet points for what needs to be worked on this August. At the same time, when's the last time Brent Venables met with you and the rest of the media?
Oh, gosh. We're scheduled to meet with him tomorrow, actually. As it stands, we haven't spoken to him since the spring game.
Okay. And not heard from him since, of course, SEC Media Days. I was just curious, since he is a talker and usually tells us more than we ask, if there were some other items that could be checked off in regards to reading into his comments to say he really wants to get this figured out in the next few weeks or that figured out, in addition to what, of course, you've addressed already. Got Parker Thune here from KREF Sports. You can catch him Monday through Friday. That's at noon Central Time, KREF Sports, and of course, OU Insider on Rivals. Check out Rivals across the board, but specifically OU Insider, complete new look and improved functionality on the site. Parker, in regards to recruiting, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know so much more about it than I do, but July was a dead period. Was it simply August 1st, and now there is communication again on the recruiting scene?
Well, there's always communication. I mean, even during a dead period, guys can't visit campus, sure, but you know, the rules are structured in such a way as to allow for a loophole for basically everything. You know, that if dead period or if a certain period means coach can't call a prospect, they'll just send him a text these days and be like, hey, call me. That way I'm not the one initiating. But there's loopholes to everything. Recruiting communication is 24/7, 365. And if you're not talking to the kid, you're talking to his high school coach or his parents. And so that never stops. But the majority of the month of July was a dead period. Yes, there was a brief window at the end of the month where prospects were allowed to visit campuses. It's going to be this is the last year that's going to be like that for the foreseeable future. They're doing away with that window in 2025 and beyond. But Oklahoma did get a chance to get pretty much their entire 2025 class back on campus, the vast majority of their verbal commits back on campus for an event to hang out with one another, and then managed to get a number of their top 2026 and 2027 targets to campus as well for unofficial visits. So yes, recruiting never stops. And at a place like the University of Oklahoma, it's certainly there is no rest for the weary in that realm.
Any particular targets, announced dates of selections of schools that are coming up?
Yeah, 5-star offensive lineman Michael Fusi is one of 3 remaining targets for Oklahoma in the 2025 class. His decision is coming on August 21st. He's going to choose between Oklahoma and Texas. So that's one that Sooners are waiting for bated breath. Or I'm sorry, that's one that Sooner fans are waiting with bated breath for, because he is and will be the highest rated target that Oklahoma has pursued throughout the entirety of the 2025 class. He's the number 10 player in the nation, according to our national council at Rivals. So that would be a splash addition for Oklahoma. There's a degree of modest confidence in the OU camp, and I think folks on the Texas side have conceded for about the last month or so that OU is best positioned. But of course, in today's day and age, Mark, especially when you're dealing with a high-end offensive tackle, nothing really matters until those final NIL offers hit the table.
Parker Thune's joining us to talk OU football, OU Insider on Rivals. And again, if you check out the Rivals sites and especially OU Insider, you will see I've looked through them. Exceptional functionality, new look, better in every possible way. So you got to check it out. And then KREF Sports with Parker every Monday through Friday at noon Central. Parker, ever since Gavin Sawchuk and Javante Barnes were recruited and signed, there's an attachment there in regards to evaluation, comparisons, that sort of thing. They're different style running backs, but I've found it interesting that in terms of who's made the more progress, they seem to have jumped back and forth a few times. Of course, I believe Barnes is more the home run hitter and maybe had a higher perceived ceiling coming in. Sawchuk had the couple 100-yard games as a freshman down the stretch, including the bowl game. But now Sawchuk has obviously been the more dependable runner and played last year. Barnes injured. Where does that dynamic stand right now?
I think it's going to be interesting, Mark, and the expectation is that Sawchuk is going to lead the backfield committee into 2024 because he closed out the 23 season once he got healthy with 5 consecutive 100-yard plus games. And so he definitely seized the bull by the horns down the stretch. Barnes was dealing with injury all year. Even when he played, he was very obviously not 100%, lacked a fifth gear. I think he ended up averaging less than 4 yards per carry, and you could see why if you watched him carry the football. He just did not have that same burst that he did in 2022 as a true freshman when he ascended the depth chart quickly to become the primary handcuff to Eric Gray, who ended up a 4th-round draft pick of the New York Giants following that season. So I think the thought was always that Barnes was more college ready, and in the long run, Sawchuk was the one that had the higher ceiling. So it wasn't all that shocking to see Barnes make more of an immediate dent than Sawchuk. But I think what's interesting to consider is that, if Barnes doesn't get hurt last year, if he isn't laid up with injury for a lot longer than Sawchuk was, he probably doesn't cede as many carries and as many touches as he and the rest of the backfield ended up ceding to Sawchuk in the latter half of the 2023 season. Now, Brent Venables loves to say the best ability is availability. And Gavin Sawchuk was the one guy in the backfield that was fully available throughout the latter half of the 2023 campaign. And so he capitalized on other guys' absences and really put himself in position to be RB1 this year for Oklahoma. But seeing how Barnes shakes back is going to be really, really interesting because everybody, it seems like the majority of this fan base, Mark, they remember the Javante Barnes that was crippled in 2023. They're not as quick to remember the guy who in 2022 looked like one of the most promising freshman backs in the entire country. So if Barnes resembles the 2022 version of himself this fall, the Sooners are going to have a real dangerous 1-2 punch in that backfield. Then you throw in true freshman Taylor Tatum, who's already earned some pretty rave reviews internally. He comes in as the number 1 running back in the country in this most recent 2024 recruiting cycle. DeMarco Murray has himself a variety of options that he can deploy in that backfield.
Parker Thune at KREF Sports every Monday through Friday, noon Central Time, and OU Insider on Rivals. Anything in particular, Parker, you would like to highlight for everyone?
No, I mean, I think you do all of my highlighting for me, Mark. Find my stuff at ouinsider.com. Listen to me on KREF, and you can download the KREF app to make sure that you can listen from anywhere in the world. Crystal clear.
Parker, thank you so much for stopping by. You have a great day.
Yep, not a problem, Mark. Take it easy.
Parker Thune does an exceptional job. We've had him on for years, probably hundreds of times at this point, certainly dozens. And again, OU Insider and Rivals, OU Insider, KREF Sports. And we've got a question here coming in. We appreciate Nick. Whoa. Well, that's put me on the spot. I'm trying to catalog all the defenses in the history of college football, but Nick, I do appreciate the question. Mark, rank Michigan's 2023 defense all time in college football. Oh, in the CFP. Okay. Well, that's a little bit more reasonable. I thought in history. Okay. Now, again, I like to be thorough. I like to be exhaustive, and I like to be accurate. So the best way for me to do that would be to actually go back, look at the personnel, look at the stats, look at the opponents, all of that. However, I will say this to start on the Michigan 2023 defense, that I stated before the season started that they had the best cornerback tandem in the country. That proved to be true. Even though Alabama's was more highly touted at the outset, especially considering that Mike Sanders still was not a star at that point and did a remarkable job, obviously, transitioning as a wide receiver. And also that Will Johnson, even though he was a 5-star, he had just hit the scene and started to show who he was late in 2022 into the Big Ten championship game against Purdue, etc. I will say as well that the Michigan pass rush coming from a number of guys is something that is so much more difficult for an offense to deal with than having, I'll use their rivals, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, one guy that's a superstar. That's tough to deal with because it helps the other guy on the other side become so much more effective. It should, but to have the pass rush push from the defensive tackle, and of course one of the signature plays, and this rarely happens, but when it happens, it's interesting because it's not about that play. It's about what that play indicates, of course, is a play in which they gave up like a 30-yard gain. That was against Penn State, and you saw Kenneth Grant track down a Penn State running back. I think it was Katron Allen. I don't think it was Nick Singleton. I think it was Allen, who's an excellent running back. Kenneth Grant tracked him down. Did that play mean a lot? No, they actually gave up 30 yards, but it shows how athletic Grant in particular, but his running mates as defensive tackles were, and the sheer hustle. It was just a signature play. Of course, the two linebackers that they had that moved on to the NFL were exceptional, with Barrett and Colson. Not like athletic freaks, but highly experienced guys that knew their roles, knew how to play the defense. And then with Ernest Hausman coming in as one of the prized freshmen in the Big Ten the previous season to play substantially as a backup fill-in guy, may have started a game or two. I don't know. Don't think he did, but still played substantially. Yeah, it's a rock-solid defense. Rock-solid defense. Okay, to compare that and to finish up my analysis of ranking and evaluating Michigan's defense in 2023, I stated for most of the season that Man, I hate to say all the best defense was in the Big Ten because, again, then the counter argument is that the offenses are so bad in the quarterback play that, of course, their defensive rankings are puffed up. But I think this is played out in a number of ways when these teams have gone outside the conference. Number one, to an extent, especially with Michigan, of course, winning the Natty and through the NFL draft selection process. But I think I was pretty accurate from the start. Things change. Considering college football, we've got little sample sizes to determine our thought process on teams. We have the least number of data points than in any other sport. But I said very early in the season that aside from Georgia, that the 4 best defenses in the country were all in the Big Ten. But that Penn State had the most athletic defense, that they potentially had the best defense. And I think if you really look at the performance and look at how they can run and hit and how the draft selections played out, I would stay with that evaluation. Not that Penn State had the best defense, but they had the most athletic defense with the highest ceiling. Going into the playoffs, all things considered, I called it to be a very close call between Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Iowa defensively. Iowa, of course, crippled by its offense. So its poor defense is out there. They were top 3 in the country in snaps. And they're getting off the field, but the offense was so bad that they're back on the field. So for Iowa to perform as well as they did, even though that their schedule was marginal, I know, against the 3rd or 4th most snaps in the conference. So in summary, I did not have a best defense in the country last year until the playoffs. Then I watched Michigan, and even though the other teams did not have those type of games against elite competition, Ohio State defense was excellent against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, but the stakes weren't high. I'm not going to take that much into consideration, even though they played extremely well in that game. Michigan showed against what was arguably the best passing attack in the country in the national championship game and the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. And then prior to that, against Alabama, holding them to 20 points in an overtime game in which their special teams faltered, Michigan, that was the best defense in the country. No question in my mind. Okay, comparing that against the CFP, who are the best defenses? 2014 Ohio State, loaded, an NFL team on defense. 2015 Alabama, of course, loaded NFL players. I could go through the rosters and go through the lineups to refresh my memory in terms of the exact personnel, but I watched all those teams play 7-8 games and know all the players. It would just be a reminder of who they were. The 2018 Clemson defense with that defensive front, that's the best defensive front, that Clemson defensive front. Lawrence, Bryant, all those guys. Farrell. Clemson defensive front 2018. However, the rest of the defense, good, not exceptional. They were led by their front. 2019, 2020, and 21, of course, then we get to the Georgia defense. Now, I will say that what is stuck in my brain about that Georgia defense is that they played Clemson on opening night in Charlotte. And that Clemson offense was not that good. But we went into that game thinking Clemson just made the playoff and DJ's taken over this team and he looked great. His 2 auditions in replacing Trevor Lawrence. Regardless, even though it was not a good Clemson offense, it proved to be poor quarterback play, poor by Clemson standards, wide receiver play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that Georgia just wrecked that game, gave up 3 points, a field goal to Clemson. That's tough to do. They followed that up by playing a home game against Arkansas, an Arkansas team that beat Penn State in a bowl game, that finished at 9-4 with KJ Jefferson, a quarterback who threw 21 touchdowns and 4 picks. An excellent Arkansas offense with Rocket Sanders at running back, who ran for 13 or 1,400 yards. I don't think I've seen that dominant of a defensive game. I don't think I've seen that dominant of a defensive game against a good team with weapons probably since Alabama against LSU in the championship game 2011. 37-0. So Georgia had an odd season that year in that they were the best defense during this era except for one game. Now, the score of the Alabama game may be a bit deceiving. They lost 42-24, I recall. So, wow, Georgia gave up 42 points. Okay. Pick 6. And I think there were some other advantageous field position situations caused by the Georgia offense. Stetson Bennett turning it over. So they didn't play well. Far from dominant. Had an off game. But I think that does count. The Michigan defense was more consistent. The Michigan defense did not have a bad game. The Michigan defense was really only challenged by Ohio State. That's the only offense that scored, really did anything. And certainly they didn't have a great game. Scored 24 points. They had a decent game. They had to earn those 24 points. And of course, if the game situation was different on the last drive, Ohio State might have scored, but they didn't have much time. They had to chuck the ball. They got picked off. So they did get nicked up by Ohio State, even though aside from one brutal drive in which Ohio State shoved the ball down their throats, they stopped the run. And of course, they intercepted Kyle McCord twice, which proved to be decisive. That was more of an airtight game. But that Ohio State offense, for as talented as it was limited with McCord, with Emeka Buka injured, had a bad ankle, was never himself. Offensive line wasn't great. The Alabama team that scorched Georgia with Bryce Young at quarterback, better offense. Jamison Williams, John Mechie. They didn't have those two guys. And because of that, another key point in this comparison, so I'm down to Georgia and Michigan. Another key comparison here, although that 2015 Alabama team, wow, would love to have seen this Michigan team play a Deshaun Watson-led Clemson offense with Mike Williams and Artavis Scott and that crew, Hunter Renfrow. That might have been challenging. So here's your lineup. Because Georgia got torched by Bama in the SEC championship game, and even though they made amends for it a month later in the national championship game, that was Alabama without John Mechie, without Jamison Williams, and Alabama would have won that game if their wide receivers would have caught the ball. They had key drops all over that game. So here it is. Even though I would have loved to have seen Michigan play a legitimate non-conference schedule in 2023, the Michigan defense of 2023's as a team, it's almost like I had a point to make here. Who was the best team in the country last year? Well, of course, Michigan won the national championship, but the one game we would all have loved to have seen was Michigan-Georgia, but Georgia didn't make it. Georgia was more talented than Michigan, and I don't know what would have happened in that game. Vegas tells us Georgia would have been a favorite, and I believe that Georgia, yes, more talented, probably a better team of players, but Michigan just had something special, something working that brought them just even more. Not that Georgia didn't play as a team and weren't close and all that, but there was something about that Michigan team in 2023 to make them, in my estimation, if somebody would say, Mark, who was the best team in 2023, regardless of who won the national championship, I might have said after the season Georgia, but I will say Michigan slight edge over Georgia. Alabama 3, Ohio State 4, Oregon, Texas, etc. Anyway, so I never answer these questions quickly, do I? Michigan, because actually get some meat here. Other people would just rip off a list. Michigan 2023 won. Georgia 2021 2. Clemson 2018 3. Alabama 2015 4. Don't think I'm missing anyone. Ohio State 2014 5. Maybe another Alabama team in there, maybe another Clemson team of 2016 or 17. But there you go. There's your list. Man, you got your money's worth for $1.99. I'm telling you that. All right. We do appreciate you being here. And one more time, of course, the Voice of College Football this week is brought to you by Chris Gates Fitness and his new online membership training camp. So please check it out. The link is in the description section of all the videos. Please check it out. $10 for the first month. I cannot explain to all of you what a deal that is. Coaching, instruction on how to do the exercises, an online community. You also have nutritional advice on there. You've got a full website and community again. You've got membership benefits with all sorts of football pick'em, challenges, giveaways, all those opportunities. These fitness apps cost $50 or $60 a month. Many of them, the ones that I've seen, the ones that my friends, I've got a good buddy, he's got a fitness app. It's like $55 a month. And those are, from what I've seen, very generic. They might be effective, but it's not nearly as personal as this opportunity here. So again, $10 for the first month. Use the promo code VOICE. Hopefully Nick is satisfied with my answer. I checked in on the Michigan show as I always do on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Typically do. It was quite the conversation. Had some Ohio State fans check in on the call-in show last night. And it's always entertaining. It rarely gets old. I will say a few times in my life, yes, the whole Michigan-Ohio State rhetoric back and forth has grown a bit weary. But usually it's just entertaining. It's amusing. Yeah, do I get annoyed at times? Yeah, I do. That's fine. That's fine. Fans are going to say fanatical, kind of dumb, delusional things. That's what happens. One of my favorite things to do, we're going to re-rank, or we're going to adjust the national championship tally throughout history because it's screwed up. And we've already done it from 1980 through last season. So, for example, we'll give you 1 year as an example. This is a very brief and this is a very simplistic example because during the college football playoff era, I am not taking any national championships away from anyone. They all earned the national championship. However, as a side note, in our official Voice of College Football National Champions list, which will one day, I know it won't gain a whole lot of national attention right now, but we're going to keep preaching the truth. And one day, I may not even be here, but one day there might be talk about, okay, well, this national championship list actually makes sense. Let's look at this Voice of College Football National Championship and the reasoning as to reassigning national championships. But we'll take 2023 as an example. Well, how in the world would we ever challenge the national championship of 2023? We are not challenging Michigan's national championship. However, let's understand a caveat to that is that Florida State did not receive an earned opportunity to win the national championship. So I am not awarding Florida State the national championship. They simply were not afforded the opportunity that they earned to win a national championship. So I believe that should be a footnote to the 2023 season in regards to a national championship. We got Bill Bender here from Sporting News. Bill, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We do appreciate you making it. Know that you've got a busy, packed schedule, as I guess everyone in college football suddenly does, coming out of media days and then right into fall camp. Everybody hits the field this week, but it's still too early to really gather any intel from what's happened on the field. Most of the teams are still not even in pads. But that said, as you scan training camp over the next 3 or 4 weeks, aside from game-changing, team-changing type injuries, which of course we don't want to see, but it's inevitable. What storylines and what information are you trying to gather that's going to shape your outlook and maybe your predictions on this season?
Well, you start at the top with Ohio State, the quarterback battle there, where Will Howard and Devin Brown are going at it. Yeah, I think Will Howard will eventually win that starting job, but that's one. I mean, they've got every other piece. We just don't know 100% who the quarterback is, even though I think it's Will Howard. And then with Robert Thomas in Georgia, that was obviously a storyline, and I think a much needed statement by Kirby Smart and with Georgia letting Rara go after this rash of offseason arrests they've had.
Hey, Bill, that's a great point with Georgia in particular. Let's settle down right at this spot because it's just odd what has transpired there. So this is not simply, okay, this program's off the rails, it's run amok, guys are doing all sorts of crazy things. Aside from the Rara Thomas story, in which there was more to his situation than just a traffic violation or reckless driving, there was unfortunately family violence there, or at least those allegations. But with all the rest of these, they seem to be isolated to driving. It is so strange. We're talking about 24 incidents inside of 2 years for one football program.
Right. And like you said, most of them are driving. You hear one or two from a program, player caught speeding, a player driving under the influence. Unfortunately, that does happen. This is a rash. And I don't, it's hard for me to say behind closed doors how that's really going to impact this team. Other than Kirby needing to, you can go on a podium and we can listen to it and they can talk about a culture of accountability and all those things that they talk about at media days. But you just kind of roll your eyes when you see one after another and nobody get penalized. And they talked about how part of it is the NIL collectives. They're going to start finding them there. To me, it's always playing time. You take away a kid's playing time, his film, his shot for the next level. That's the best way to get your point through.
Getting back to the Big Ten, there are some teams on the periphery. Of course, Michigan or Ohio State and Oregon, according to the odds makers, are given that favorite status. Michigan's the defending champion. Penn State, USC, Iowa, They seem to be on the fringe. Who do you think has a real shot of possibly breaking into the elite, and why out of those three? Or maybe somebody else that you like?
Well, Iowa and Penn State have friendly schedules in two different directions. Iowa has to go to Ohio State. Penn State gets Ohio State at home. I think USC is a very interesting team in Indianapolis. I was not taken aback, I don't know even what the word is, like pleasantly surprised at the candor of Lincoln Riley. I mean, you and I have been at that event, and you know how buttoned up most Big Ten coaches are. But the candor from him and Dan Lanning was, oh, here's a coach actually saying what he feels and not afraid to, go at the media a little bit. That said, I still think we'll have to see what their defense looks like. So of those options presented that could join Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon in that Big Ten race, I think it's Penn State. Penn State was picked third by the media. I would pick them fourth. I would still have Michigan ahead of them. I know Michigan's schedule's tougher. It's one of those trust. I just trust Michigan a little bit more, even with all those changes, than I do Penn State.
Bill Bender's here from Sporting News. Check out Bill's work. You see his X handle right there. And then, of course, sportingnews.com, which has been a staple in the industry forever. And when you talk about Penn State, it's interesting because, Bill, of course, we know that based on the college football playoff rankings, that they would have been a playoff team 6 times out of 10 years as a 12 team. They benefit the most of anybody in college football. If history repeats itself, Notre Dame would probably be right there as well. So I would think that they could produce the same season this year. And let's say they lose the first round playoff. Now, there'll be some people that will be critical and point out they didn't do anything different. The format changed. It's the same James Franklin and the same Penn State. They went 10-2 and then lost a playoff game. But I think that would appease their fans for maybe a season or two before they would start to grumble and say, hey, now let's do something in the playoff.
Oh, I agree. Good news for Penn State. Drew Aller's back. 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Didn't play well in the big games. This is not breaking news by any stretch. Everybody saw the Michigan, Ohio State, Ole Miss struggles, but another year under center. A little more help at receiver. Good news, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen back. They combined for 14 rushing touchdowns last year. The defense will be good. I think you bring up an interesting point because, and I don't know if I talked to you about this last time I was on your show, but the theory for me in some ways is a playoff appearance akin to a Sweet 16 appearance in basketball now, where, okay, he made the Sweet 16. He's cool. We're not gonna fire this coach now. And I don't know that Penn State has another answer should they move away from James Franklin. You look at the track record, it's pretty good. It's just Ohio State's a little bit better, and Michigan is a little bit better in those battles that they've had. No Michigan on the schedule's huge. I will say if anybody has the most pressure to be on the playoff, it's probably them or Ole Miss.
Absolutely. Jackson, thank you so much for dropping Bill's links, Instagram, X, all of them are right there for everyone to go directly from our conversation to follow Bill on those various platforms. So Jackson, thank you so much for doing that. And what's interesting about Penn State as well is it was just listening to James Franklin address the media at Big Ten Media Days. I was hearkened back to the comment that is now going on 6 years ago, in which he said after another Ohio State excruciating loss, he called his program great. I took a little exception to that, but we all have different terms. But he was basically saying we're really good. They're elite, pointing to their locker room and saying, we need to get there. And that seemed like this big statement to say, almost read between the lines, we are going to get there. But now we're going on 6 years and Penn State's pretty much still sitting in the same spot.
Right. And I've been to those big ones. The Saquon Barkley year at the Shoe, they had Ohio State beat. And then JT Barrett rallied Ohio State to a victory there. When they played in a whiteout, I had a very different story written with 8:09 remaining. And then, Ben Victor catches a long pass, and at the end of that game, I think Chase Young stopped Trace McSorley. You could hear a pin drop. Last year, big buildup, and sitting there, he repeated the same speech you just said. I believe the phrasing was something to the effect of one of the top 3 defenses in the nation. Well, Ohio State and Michigan were just a little bit better on defense too, right? And some would say Penn State was a little bit better than Ohio State. I would push back on that. But when you have those elite defenses, Michigan was just a little bit better. I think that perception-wise, the one that hit the most last year was Michigan beating them in their house, coming off the Harbaugh suspension, not throwing the ball. Like, that was trolling. Is that my kids tell me that's the word, trolling. They were trolling Penn State openly in the second half in that game. So, yeah, but I still think he's done a very good job there. Winning 10 games, there's nothing wrong with that. They're getting better. They're a lot better at not losing games they shouldn't lose. They've had a couple exceptions, the Illinois 20 overtime game. But I like the program. I like how they develop players. I like how they recruit. You need to find a couple receivers, I think. That's the big one for them. That was the difference between them and the Buckeyes last year.
Bill Bender breaking down Big Ten football, college football, sporting news is where you can find him. You see all the particulars down on the screen. In fact, Bill, of course, Ryan Day could be put in the same category as James Franklin, just at a higher level, meaning this is what you're expected to do. You're falling short. What are you going to tell us about it? I go back to when Ryan Day hit the podium at Big Ten Media Days. It was just a couple hours following an appearance on ESPN, one of their morning shows. And then Paul Feinbaum responded to that comment to basically say, what's Ryan Day done? He needs to beat Michigan. Da, 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 da. And I thought the question or the response was supposed to be that Paul Feinbaum was responding to what Ryan Day had to say, not his track record of he can't do anything about that.
Right.
All he can say is all the right things, which to me is, it's unacceptable. We know who we are. We know what the expectations are. We're working to correct it.
Yeah, he can't beat Michigan on August 2nd. That's a great point. They can't. I thought being around Ryan Day in Indy that he was loose. For all this talk about pressure and the illogical nature of this pressure, that I was talking to somebody last night. I was like, so in high school, I won't go too far off the track here. In high school, I really struggled once I got to the second algebra class. And I think this 12-team college football playoff, in terms of pressure and hot seats, you have to teach the math on this in terms of, okay, Ohio State gets to the semifinals or second round and loses, but they beat Michigan. I think he's fine. I really do, even though that deck is really loaded. If they lose to Michigan, get to the national title game, I don't know. I don't know how they'll feel in Columbus, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to fire him. So I think the Michigan game's the first priority, but they can't do that now. And I think he was loose because he's got a loaded deck. 11 guys that could have gone to the NFL draft come back. On top of this, transfer portal ads like Caleb Downs, Quinn Shad, Will Howard, they're loaded. So, and they're not going to be tested till they play Iowa. So I think that's why and he was talking today in his availability about how long the season's going to be. Who manages that, right? Like, who manages playing all these games? And I think Ohio State's built to do all of those things.
Bill, I would have named Iowa to be their first test as well. A lot of people wouldn't. They're going to be like a 25-point favorite in that game. That seems ridiculous, but I remember the Iowa game 2 years ago, and we do an Iowa show with our buddy Corey Bratta, and I told him during the offseason, and I underestimated it because we were talking about the Iowa matchup, and they were coming off a 10-2 season, and I said, Ohio State's going to be like a 22-point favorite, and he was like, no, that's crazy. There's no way. They turned out to be a 30-point favorite in that game, and they covered the spread. I still think that that's a tricky spot. Iowa, if they can figure out some offense, and of course they hire Tim Lester to do just that. It could be a difficult play for the Buckeyes there in October.
Yeah, and first real defense they're going to play. I remember that game you referenced. Iowa, strangely, there was a story written after about how they would have been better off punting. Their offense was terrible. Their defense still played well. They made CJ Stroud uncomfortable. Ohio State had trouble driving the field. And when I say tough game, it's going to be a physical game, and it's the week before Oregon. So it's a test there. And then a little bit later, they play Nebraska, who we can talk about a little bit if you like. An improved Nebraska team the week before Penn State. So these couple minor potholes, Tim May pointed that out to me, the great Tim May, Ohio State writer. And the more I think about it, those are not trap games, but just kind of, you better realize that there's a pothole there, and you better get, step around it, do what you need to do to get through it.
Yeah, a lot of people misinterpret my predictions, and I take a lot of criticism for it because I just don't select, okay, well, the obvious Ohio State loss is at Oregon. That probably will be the one. But if you look at the results at the end of the season, I say this all the time, Bill, if you track top 25 games, there's about 20 to 23 per week, because sometimes obviously they play each other. You can count on this like clockwork. 4 or 5 of those games will be upsets. Right. So they're not always the games that are supposed to be the upsets or the losses that you can peg. And so, yeah, it's often the Iowa game and not the Oregon game that turns out to be the trip up. But of course, that's not going to much matter in this new playoff format. We got Bill Bender from Sporting News breaking down the Big Ten for us. We'll go to Nebraska since you brought him up. Of course, everyone there in Huskerland is excited about finally getting back to a bowl game. I throw this one at people from time to time, and they can't believe it, that Nebraska has the longest bowl drought of any team in the nation. Not Vanderbilt, not Rutgers, not whomever else you would think, but it's Matt Rule now. And even though this team and this program seemed so different last year, and listening to a very confident, very conversational head coach who had a winning track record in Matt Rule, they look like the same team in the fourth quarter every week that would blow the game. Now we'll see what happens this year, but what are your thoughts about the Huskers?
7 straight losing seasons is mind-blowing. And for somebody like me that grew up and it was like an event when they lost in the 90s, especially from 94 to 97. I know where I was when Arizona State beat them. Like, that was a landmark upset. So
shut them out.
Yeah. Actually, a guy I played high school football with was on that Arizona State team. So that's the biggest reason I know that. But as far as Matt Rule, he knows how to win the press conference. He's brilliant in that environment. Big Ten Media Day, I always think he's the biggest winner. He's great on the podium. He's personable. He's funny. Right combination of humor. One thing that stuck out with me is he knows, and I'm a numbers nerd too. He was like, we have 37 defenses. Oregon was 12-2. He knows his numbers, which is great. I think they're going to go to a bowl game this year. I think they're going to get off to a fast start. The sense I got is they are itching to get Colorado in their stadium. That they were not happy about how last year went, and they're ready for that one. Their fan base is ready for that one. And I think Raiola is the X factor. Anytime you have a 5-star quarterback freshman, it's hard to hold down the hype. Matt tried. He won't go on and on about Dylan Raiola, but that's why Peyton Manning was so big at Tennessee, or Terrell Pryor at Ohio State. When you get a guy like that, he's going to play. So how quickly he picks things up, I think they're a very interesting team, and can't wait to see what they do and where they will be. I think 6 or 7 games in when they go to Ohio State, do they actually compete in that game? Because to me, every Big Ten school, fair or unfair, I measure them against Ohio State still. Even with Michigan, I still measure Michigan up against how you do against that loaded Ohio State roster. And obviously the last 3 years, they've taken care of that.
And Nebraska's played well at times against Ohio State. Of course, they did at home against that CJ Stroud team a couple years ago, only lost by 1 score. They took them to the wire in 2018 against that Urban Meyer team that eventually won the Rose Bowl, went 13-1, but struggled against a lot of mediocre teams. But when you talked about Nebraska possibly having a shiny, impressive record coming into Columbus, what that reminded me of was 2016. They were 7-0. They hit Columbus and 62-3.
I was at that game. Yeah, it was over. That was one of those fights that was over before it was started, right?
Got Bill Bender here from Sporting News. Bill, one more thing we'll hit you before you need to take off, but the Michigan verdict is expected to come down any day. Boy, we could go on for hours, but we'll just get your quick thoughts about what that could look like and what it means.
Yeah, I mean, conspiracy theory, I mean, is that's going to come out right about the time that Connor Stallion's Netflix special comes out. They'll probably coincide, so I'm going to have to write 2 stories that day instead of 1. I don't think I think they'll get punished. I think it'll be financial. I don't know that one thing I do need to research a little bit closer because it came up last year is if they get a postseason ban, the college football playoff doesn't have to necessarily follow what the NCAA does. That was made clear last year. It was like, okay, we could leave you out of the Big Ten championship. Well, the playoff could still take them. So is a postseason ban even worth it? I don't think they'll vacate wins. And that's the one that both sides, and when I say both sides, I'm talking Ohio State, Michigan fans. When I see them bicker on Twitter, Ohio State fans want those wins vacated. They want it so they can say they cheated. These last 3 years didn't count. There's big asterisks next to that. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think Michigan fans, they may take a year bowl ban instead of losing that title. And that seems like regressive thinking, but that's what we do in college football. We clutch on to what we've won. You know, Louisville lost that national championship in basketball, and I think it still hurts. It really does. But if they still had that to cling on to, it would help them get through some really rough seasons in basketball. So I'm interested. I don't know about you, about Connor Stallions and what this documentary does. I don't know if you watched Manziel and Swamp Kings last year, but those were very one-sided. And I have a feeling this special is going to be very one-sided, and it's just going to make people angry about an issue that I think Michigan's trying to put in the rearview mirror, but it's not necessarily going to go away.
It's not a conversation right now, and we know you need to go, but sometime in the offseason, would love to take your perspective on the Ohio State situation of 2010, 11, 12 with the tattoo gate and all that and how that transpired, because I have serious issues with that. Not necessarily that they were found to have broken rules. They did, but I have some issues with the penalties there. Bill, we know you need to run. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Well, I hope to make this a habit during the season. This is so much fun talking to you. We cover a lot of ground in a hurry, and until next time, we'll do it again.
Absolutely, Bill. You're welcome anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bill Bender, Sporting News. Good to hear from Bill. You can hear the obvious perspective, experience, logic. He's been around for quite some time, and when you get hired and you produce for Sporting News for a long, long time, that is credibility. No question about that. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. We do this each and every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. I guarantee an hour every day. Past that, it is up to you based on your contributions. We've got nothing in the pipeline. Adam, call us back sometime, and we would love to. I would love to field your question and have the conversation concerning that particular national championship season in 2021. And we will do that at a later date. But again, we're going to be here from 10 to 11, Monday through Friday. Whether we extend past 11, we'll give you particulars on that starting on Monday, but that is up to you. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. 7 p.m. Eastern time, we are ranking programs 2024 program rankings, 134 all the way up to number 1. See you then.